Bangko Sentral Eng Filipinas. Dato Badli Shah Abdul Ghani, who is the president of the Chartered Institute of Islamic Finance Professional, or CIIF, and Mr. Abdullah Firman Wibowo, the Vice President Director of Bank Syariah Indonesia.
أيها السادات الكرام، سيحاضر أمامنا عن الموضوع المذكور 3 محاضرين، أولئك هم المكرمة أتي أريفا ألوية ألا كمساعد محافظ في بانكو سنترال أنج فيليبيناس، المكرم داتو بدلي شاه عبد الغني كرئيس المعهد القانوني للمحترفين في التمويل الإسلامي AICIF، والمكرم عبد الله فيرمان ويبوو كنائب رئيس المدير لبنك شريعة إندونيسيا.
This plenary session will be moderated by Dr. Huriah L. Islami, LLB Honors, MCL, PhD, the Executive Board Member of Badan Pengelola Keuangan Haji, or BPKH. To all of our participants, we hope you can all learn as much as you can from the following session.
ستقوم بتنظيم هذه المحاضرة ألا وهي دكتورة حرية الإسلامي LLB Honors MCL PhD من أعضاء Badan Pengelola Keuangan Haji أي BPKH، فيرجى منا الاهتمام.
To Dr. Huriah L. Islami, LLB Honors, MCL, PhD, the time is yours.
عليها فلتتفضل مشكورا.
Terima kasih Mbak Audrey, terima kasih Mas Bagas. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh. Wa na'udzu billahi min sururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. May yahdihillahu fala mudhillalah wa may yudlil fala hadiyalah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yaumiddin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Thank you the event organizer for having us here. Me as the moderator for the event and the 3 respective panelists. Let me first of all welcome you all to the 9th Asian University International Conference on Islamic Finance. And as had been introduced by the masters of ceremonies just now, we have already had great and respected speakers line up as the panelists for this session. The topic for the session is the pivotal role of Islamic banks in strengthening Islamic economy and halal industry towards economic recovery and sustainable development amidst the pandemic era. In line with the topic and also the whole theme of the event, of the conference, we already have the view from, inshallah, 3 different countries here. We have Dato' Badli Shah Abdul Ghani as the President of Chartered Institute of Islamic Finance Professional, who will share his experience, his thought, usually forward-looking, we'll see about it later on, that represent Malaysia. I wouldn't mind though if he will share beyond Malaysia, as he has this global exposure and coverage during his previous tenure as the founder, as well as the group of the CIMB Islamic, group CEO of the CIMB Islamic. And we also have with us our sister attorney, Arifa Aulia Ala, the assistant of Governor Bangko Sentral and Filipinas, who inshallah will share the views, the experience, as well as the plan, what it is that the Bangko Sentral and Philippines maybe have in line in plan that it would like to implement due to the pandemics, especially in particular attention with the focus on Islamic finance. So we are glad that we have also the expert on that with us today. Last but not least, from our home country, Pak Abdullah Firman Wibowo, the Wakil Direktur Utama to Bank Syariah Indonesia, who will, of course, share with us now that there is a merger which by miracle happened during the pandemic, ya Pak ya. So it happened during the pandemic, despite all the challenges, difficulties, the merger is happened now. This is the largest Sharia bank in Indonesia, and he's one of the leader who is heading the bank. So we are very excited to hear about his view as well. So without further ado, since our sister attorney Arifah has a further commitment later on, so we would like to welcome her. We would like to give her the floor to share her view and the thought that she would like us to hear today. Sister Attorney Arifah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sister Dr. Huria. To my co-speakers, Brother Abdullah Farman Wibu, and of course, Dato Badlisha Abdul Ghani. First of all, I'd like to thank the ASEAN universities for inviting the Bangko Sentral to participate in this event. We always welcome this kind of event as it is a very good opportunity to convey the Bangko Central's approach in promoting Islamic banking and finance in our own country. I also noticed that one of the co-organizers, the Mindanao State University, is actually my alma mater. I have finished my Bachelor of Science in Business Administration in that university. And so this event is close to my heart. So if I may request the sharing of the PowerPoint, Dr. Huria, would you like, who will be sharing the PowerPoint?
Yes, sure. Event organizer, please, could you share her presentation?
Okay. So while the PowerPoint is being uploaded, I'd like to mention that, of course, when we talk about the pivotal role of Islamic banks in strengthening Islamic economic recovery, this is very much aligned with the principle in Islam or Sharia, and the ultimate objective of Islam is to promote the welfare and the well-being of all mankind. So that principle is very much aligned with economic recovery, especially after this pandemic. Now, looking at the, I have prepared here an outline of presentation. So first of all, I'd like to give a brief background on the Islamic banking in the Philippines, particularly the status, the laws and regulations, because it was only recently that we have the broader Islamic banking law, the salient features of the law, the objectives thereof, and the implementing regulations that we have so far issued, the opportunities, and of course, I'll briefly talk about the role of Islamic banking in economic recovery. And then last but not the least, just to give you a view of how the Bangko Sentral has assisted the Philippine financial system and the financial institutions during the pandemic. The next slide would show that as of now, the Philippines has only one Islamic bank, which is the Al Amana Islamic Investment Bank of the Philippines. And this bank was actually established way back in if we move on to the next slide, please, was established way back in 1973. So it's actually one of the oldest Islamic bank in the Southeast Asia, even antedating the establishment of Dubai Islamic Bank in 1975. But for several factors and challenges, the bank was not able to operate as a full-fledged Islamic bank. And now that we have the broader Islamic banking law, it was only in 2019 that the Philippines was able to pass a broader Islamic banking law, wherein the Bangko Sentral was provided with clear authorities to issue a broader set of regulations for to actually develop Islamic banking and finance in the country. So we are actually taking a holistic approach in promoting the Islamic banking and finance. This is beyond, we understand that this is beyond the Bangko Sentral, and so other government agencies, as you can see in this slide, like the Securities and Exchange Commission, the insurance, which is taking charge of the guidelines on sukuk issuance, the Insurance Commission, which is in charge of the insurance industry in the country. We also have the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation, which takes charge of insurance of deposit liabilities. And of course, even the PFRSC, which is actually handling the preparation of the accounting guidelines for Islamic banking. We also have the Department of Trade and Industry, because it is the agency which is spearheading the Halal board initiatives. We also have the Bureau of Internal Revenue and the of course, the National Commission on Muslim Filipinos. This interagency working group is chaired. I actually chair the interagency working group. So it is actually the BSP which actually leads the working group in terms of ensuring that the approach of the different agencies are actually aligned. And we will be attaining the roadmap of the Philippine government towards promotion of Islamic banking. Now, I mentioned a while ago that the Al-Amana Bank was established way back in 1973, and it was only recently that we had the law, the Republic Act 1104, for example, or the Bangsamoro Organic Law, which contains provisions on promoting Islamic banking in the Bangsamoro area in the southern part of the Philippines. We also have even our own charter. We actually included a provision that would provide the Bangko Sentral with authority to create facilities that will cater to the needs of Islamic banking institutions that will operate here in the Philippines. We also have the broader Islamic banking law, which is the RA 11439. And this particular law has addressed many of the challenges that, like for example, before the said law, we cannot allow other players to get into the system. And so that law was able to address that particular constraint by actually opening the Philippine system to other players in the system, to other players, even foreign players. So if we can move back to the previous slide, because that will talk about the Islamic banking laws in the Philippines, certain provisions wherein it is actually mandating government agencies to actually launch programs to increase awareness and understanding of Islamic banking and finance, because we believe that without understanding and appreciation of the benefits that the Filipinos can gain out of patronizing Islamic banking and finance, it will not be able to, Islamic banking in the Philippines will not be able to grow significantly. And so we also, those law, for example, in the Bangsamoro Organic Law, there it also includes a provision wherein the government is mandated to create a Sharia Supervisory Board. And of course, a Sharia Supervisory Board is very much necessary in terms of settling in case of disputes on specific opinions or Sharia opinions, then that body would be able to settle and assist in the settlement of issues like those. And then if we can move on to slide 5. And then we also, like currently, the BSP is also in the process of implementing Section 89A of its charter, wherein we are actually designing facilities that are Sharia compliant. So the next slide would be talking about the challenges that was addressed by the Islamic banking law. As I mentioned before the said law, other Islamic banking players are not allowed to operate here in the Philippines. And the law has actually opened up the system in order to allow other players, whether domestic banks or foreign banks. It can also be in the form of Islamic banking windows. So the approach is very flexible. The lack of legal and regulatory framework is also addressed because the law contains a provision that clearly authorizes the BSP to issue implementing rules and regulations. The issue also on tax disparities is also addressed because the law and the Department of Finance and the Bureau of Internal Revenue has actually implemented that provision by issuing a revenue regulation that provides that Islamic banking products should not be taxed more heavily nor more lightly than their conventional counterparts. And then in terms of the challenge on scarce capacity and low awareness, there's a provision mandating the government to launch programs to increase awareness and understanding of Islamic banking and finance in the Philippines. And we have been implementing this. In 2020, we have launched a series of workshops under the technical assistance of the Asian Development Bank. And many of the banking industry participants and even from other government agencies were also able to finish those courses. Now, this slide would show the objectives of the law, wherein, of course, our approach is actually not a separate regulatory framework for Islamic banking. Similar to conventional banking approach, the law is principles based, and it is also couched on also being aligned with international standards. As you may know, the Banco Central is an associate member of the Islamic Financial Services Board. So we are coordinating closely also with the IFSB. They have actually conducted some workshops to increase in the Banco Central for the benefit of not only the personnel of the Banco Central but also the banking industry. Of course, the Islamic Bank should also be aligned with the mandate of the BSP to maintain financial stability. We also expect them to have a stronger or appropriate risk management system in place. And of course, the main difference, as we understand, between conventional banking and Islamic banking is the requirement for Sharia compliance. And for that reason, we have actually issued an implementing regulations on the BSP's requirement relative to Sharia governance framework. Now, the next slide would show that the regulatory approach of the BSP. We're adopting a single regulatory framework for both conventional Islamic banks. We would also allow not only full-fledged bank, but also Islamic banking windows. And the overall objective is to create an enabling environment where Islamic banks and Islamic banking windows can operate viably alongside conventional banks. So as I mentioned a while ago, the regulations for conventional banking are adopted, but of course they are being adjusted and supplemented to address the unique characteristics of Islamic banking. The next slide would show some of the regulations that we have issued. We have issued Circular 1069, which is about the licensing framework for Islamic banks and Islamic banking windows. We have issued Circular 1070, which is the Sharia governance framework, that requirement to have a Sharia advisory council within the banking institution, because based on the law, the main responsibility for ensuring that the Islamic bank or Islamic banking window is Sharia compliant lies with the banking institution. And so they should have a governance framework that will ensure that their products and services are indeed Sharia compliant. We've also issued a frequently asked question just to also assist the public in terms of clarifying commonly asked questions. I've mentioned also a while ago about the revenue regulation, which is a great milestone for Islamic banking and finance here in the Philippines, because it has actually eliminated the challenge wherein Islamic banking products would be more costly because of higher tax implications. And then more recently, last May 2021, we established the guidelines on management of liquidity risk by Islamic banks and Islamic banking units. All of these regulations are available in the BSP website. It's publicly available. So if any one of you is interested to look at these regulations, you can find them in the BSP website. Now, moving on to the next slide, this is about 1069, which contains about the structure, the minimum capitalization, the stockholding limits, and the governance expectations for any bank or anyone who would like to operate an Islamic bank or Islamic banking window here in the Philippines. The next slide would show the Sharia governance framework, which essentially mimics the conventional regulations about effective board and management oversight, the independent internal audit function, and of course the effective Sharia Advisory Council. And of course, we have set the minimum qualifications of the Sharia, the members that can be elected or appointed by the banking institutions into their Sharia Advisory Council. Now, moving on to the next slide, it's actually the liquidity risk management. Essentially, we're adapting also the conventional liquidity risk framework, but of course, we have tweaked some of our existing regulations, taking into consideration the requirement that the liquidity risk management to be used by Islamic banks have to be Sharia compliant. Now, let's talk about the next slide would show about the opportunities. Opportunities not only of the Philippine government in terms of promoting Islamic bank, but also opportunities for potential investors in the Philippines. The next slide would show that we have an increasing number of investors in the GCC seeking to invest in Sharia compliant products. And of course, if the Philippines would promote Islamic banking, it can take advantage of those funds and in turn use them in funding infrastructure facilities in the country. This is also very much aligned with the ASEAN integration, wherein ASEAN countries are actually liberalizing the entries of each other. And in fact, in alignment with the ASEAN integration, we have liberalized the entry of foreign banks. Like, for example, a foreign bank can own up to 100% of a domestic bank or a universal bank here in the Philippines. And of course, the increasing demand for halal products and services. The governor of the Bangko Sentral sits in the halal board. And of course, we understand that Islamic finance can actually provide strong support for strengthening the halal industry here in the Philippines. Now, the next slide would show some of the opportunities of potential investors. Like, we have around 110 million Filipinos in the Philippines, and around 10 to 12% of Filipinos are actually Muslims, and majority of them reside in the BARM. And the next slide would also show that 34% of cities and municipalities in the BARM are actually unbanked. And we only have one Islamic bank here in the Philippines. So those, you can see that there's a lot of potential and untapped markets that any potential investors can actually get into. And that's to us, that's an additional attraction for potential investors into the Philippine Islamic banking and finance system. Now, moving on to the next slide, because this slide I had mentioned a while ago that there's only one Islamic bank, and so there's still a large market to be tapped here. Now, I mentioned a while ago that the principle wherein Islam would promote the well-being of all mankind is very much aligned with, assisting the country in terms of economic recovery. And as we know that even before this pandemic, from time immemorial, Islamic finance is actually very much aligned with ethical financing, as it does not also allow financing of antisocial and unethical businesses. It encourages sustainable financing. It prohibits riba, and essentially because we want equitable distribution of wealth. And of course, the fintech that we're seeing everywhere now is also very much aligned with the objectives of Sharia, of serving the entire mankind as much as practicable. And the principle of risk sharing is very much aligned in terms, like, for example, as I have a slide on some of the regulatory relief that we have provided in terms of lessening the burden of the borrowers during this pandemic. So the role, the Islamic banks can really play an important role in the economic recovery. And one more benefit about Islamic bank, due to the principle of risk sharing, in times of pandemic, the risk of loss is not entirely burdened onto the financial institution. It is shared with the borrowers and the customers, and so the impact will not be that significant. No, that's a major difference of Islamic banks versus conventional banking. The next slide would also show that in terms of halal goods and products, and even funding public infrastructure is very much aligned, no, with the Sharia banking or Islamic banking, and even also the assistance that may be provided to the health sector and financial sector. Those are all purposes, or that is very much with the principles aligned with the Islamic principles. And so if only the Philippines has more Islamic banks, then we can see more of these examples of Islamic banks providing support to the in terms of economic recovery. But of course, as of now, we only have one Islamic bank. The contribution is not that significant. But of course, the Islamic bank right now is owned by a government-owned universal banks. And of course, it's a developmental bank, and the mother company or the mother bank is actually one of the lead government banks assisting the Philippine economy in terms of economic recovery. The next slide would show some of the stimulus measures that we have that the Philippine government has provided. We have enacted laws that would provide grace periods to borrowers. Like, for example, for the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act, they were provided a 30-day grace period extension. But of course, that has lapsed already during the enhanced community quarantine. And then the Bayanihan to Recover as One, the financial institutions are actually mandated to provide a one-time 60-day grace period for the payment of all loans. And the last one, the Financial Institution Strategic Transfer Act, we understand that the Islamic, the banks now are saddled with a poor loan portfolio, and this law would actually allow them to sell off or to transfer their non-performing loans and accounts to a special purpose vehicle, and the purpose is to clean up their books and records and to transfer those loans and other assets to a company which is more specialized in disposing problem assets. Now, looking on at the last slide, which is about the promotion of digitalization, here is our BSP Governor Ben Jokno talking about the digitalization push of the BSP. We actually aim to convert 50% of total volume of retail payments into digital form by 2023. And during the pandemic, we've seen a significant increase in terms of the online transactions done through our InstaPay and PesoNet, which are actually our online two automated clearing houses. And we hope that with these initiatives of the Bangko Sentral, we can transform the Philippines into a cash-light society. Of course, when we have more Islamic banks, we have issued circulars that will encourage banking institutions to go digital. And even when we have more Islamic banks, of course, those regulations would also be enjoyed, no? And the support of the BSP would also be equally extended to Islamic banking players. So I think that ends my presentation. Thank you very much. Back to you, sister.
Thank you very much, Attorney Arifa. MashaAllah, sister. This is, I did not expect to hear such exciting and a lot, actually, very, so many information in such a period of time. Actually, you spend about 20 minutes just in time, but the information, mashallah, because, you know, like many things, I'm sure the audience here, before that, let me actually greet all the audience. So we have already 695 in Zoom, and we have live, I think, more than 100. Assalamualaikum, everyone. So, sister, it was very, the information are very enlightening. I mean, I'm sure we have many people from Philippines here also who have greeted you, who admired you, and some actually your colleague also from Philippines. We have Soraida, Anwar, Saaduddin, Manuddin, Jawad, Dr. Minambao, Shahid, and many more. I'm sure, just like us, they are very proud that you represent them here. But some information are quite exciting. You know, we didn't know. I'm sure many, except for the Filipinos who will be well aware of this, I'm sure many who attend here didn't have the clue that you had Islamic bank even 10 years before Malaysia and ahead of us, because you know Bank Islam was only established in 1983, Bank Muamalat in 1991, in the first Islamic bank in Indonesia. You had it in 1973 during the Remark's time. Masya Allah, that was eye opener. We didn't even realize that's mean the spirit for Islamic or Sharia, as we call it in Indonesia, industry has been there for quite some time. It's just that it was slow at the beginning, but we are glad to know that you already have the RA number 11439 now. That you know, you basically, if it was just a loan Islamic bank, now you have really opened the door, allow for more to actually come to also be a player, because I'm sure everyone will agree competition will encourage creativity and innovation, which is good. And at the same time, you also have RA number 10641 will also allow entry for foreign banks, so which is good. I'm sure many of those, especially from the Middle Eastern companies, or even maybe Dato Badlisha, will actually start looking at your country, you know, as the potential.
Yeah, that will be very welcome
Yeah,
to us.
because,
You know, CIMB, the CIMB is already here in the Philippines, but the
yes,
conventional side. So
yes,
we would be glad
conventional,
if the
but not
Islamic
Sharia.
side would come in. Yes.
Yes, and you know because the market in Middle East is so dense already. They need to actually go somewhere. I'm sure many will be eyeing Philippines now, and you also have the law that is now, you know, provide the regulation that was otherwise lacking in the past. The issue of tax disparities now actually has been turned by the law to tax neutrality. Mashallah, mashallah, very amazing. Interesting to hear. We actually would like to hear more from you, you know, soon, because in such a short period of time after the law was established, we have seen so many progress that have been done despite the pandemic. And we are also very glad to hear that even the governor himself, so it's really top down, and the central bank, and all the initiative that you have shared with us just now indicates clearly that now they are also giving focus to Islamic banking industry. So we are so glad to hear that, because as we are all well aware, for the past many decades, when we talk about the largest or the top Islamic banks in the world, they have been mostly dominated by the bank from the Middle East. We have two banks from Malaysia. BSE is supposed to be in the chart as well, yeah, Pak Firman. We will hear from Pak Firman later, but the latest rank has not been updated yet. I hope when we hear from Pak Firman, he'll share with us good news. Yes, really, Sister Attorney Arifah, we are so glad. By the way, Sister, your presentation has been really exciting. Many people actually would like to see it in details. So would you mind if we share it with the audience and whoever actually requests for it?
Yeah, I won't mind. You can share it with them, so they can actually send. And I indicated my email address there if they have further questions.
Excellent.
We would be glad to.
We'll be definitely in touch with you, and you'll be in our permanent. Whenever we need panelists, you know, to have updates about Islamic banks, and then the development of Islamic banking industry in. You will always be on our list. I hope you don't mind with that. So thank you very much, Sister. Unless we have any question from the audience before Sister Arifah, actually she has to miss the rest of the session later on. If you have any question, please spill for her specifically, because we would like to hear more from the other panelists first. But if you have any specific question would like to ask her, please. Just write it in the Q&A or in the chat. We'll try to actually address it if she still have some time to stay with us for a while. But meanwhile, well, I'd like to keep all the interesting update from our country later on, Pak Firman, yeah? So meanwhile, maybe we hear first from the development from Malaysia, because with the lockdown and everything, all we hear from Malaysia is that Indonesia cannot enter Malaysia yet. So yes, that Malaysia, please, we'll hear from Pak Firman later on after we hear from our guest for Malaysia first. Thank you very much.
Malaysia dulu.
Malaysia dulu ya Pak Firman, ya, biar kita dengar semua update-nya. Jadi Bapak nanti bisa share yang counter.
Thank you very much, Ibu Huria. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everyone.
First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizer and BPKH for inviting me to join in this conference and to discuss on a topic that is very, very relevant to all of us today, post-COVID-19 pandemic. What are the roles that the bank or Islamic banks specifically can play to effectively support the Islamic economy and the halal industry to recover, essentially. Right? I do not have a slide. I will go straight into the subject and discuss about it with you verbatim. There are effectively one biggest thing that an Islamic bank or any bank can do to support the revival of the economy after a pandemic, which is simply give credit. Effectively go into the market and provide the financial assistance to consumers, the individuals, as well as to the businesses that requires assistance. So let's deal with the consumer specifically. Basically, when you talk about recovery, the key to recovery essentially is confidence. Right? To go back to normal, to go back to where we used to be, or to go into the future in a better way, we need to bring back confidence to the consumers. And the key or the major influence that will bring confidence back to consumers are financial well-being. Right? So the COVID-19 pandemic has literally caused a lot of people to lose their jobs, to have their income cut in half or even cut by 2/3. Right? They just do not have any opportunity to even borrow money from their friends and families, because their friends and families are also affected by the COVID-19. So many have become also extremely destitute. Right? So these are the position that consumers have found themselves in the market. They do not have the financial well-being to be able to go back into the market and spend. Right? Many becomes, even those with money, becomes very, very cautious, and they decide to not spend, right? To save their money in the event that there is more crisis coming into the future. So what can Islamic Bank do? Right? So Islamic Bank can do the simplest thing is provide financial advisory to their customers on how to get back on their feet. Right? So don't provide financial advisory purely to people who have money. Now is a different situation, right? So we have a crisis, we have a COVID-19 pandemic that has caused a lot of problems in the market. The demand from banks by consumer is, hey, help me to recover, help me to get back on my feet. How do I do that? Right? So Islamic banks can go into the market, send out their officers to effectively sit down with their customers. This is how you can get back on your feet, right? So that's the financial advice part, right? Islamic banks have the knowledge, has the capital in terms of the wherewithals of overcoming financial difficulty within their organization, right? So use all their staff to help customers to get back on their feet, right? So that's one, right? The other essentially is go back to basic. Banks is there to take deposit and to provide financing, right? Use the deposit that they have collected, because many people have been very cautious and they save money in banks, right, while the crisis is happening. So so a lot of banks should have a lot of money in their pocket. Figure out how to provide those financing in a manner that is cheap and accessible to the customers who are out there in the market in a way where they don't have jobs or they have limited income or reduced income. You cannot go into the market after a crisis with your on-the-shelf product, right? You have to come up with programs. Banks have to come up with programs that is catered to people who have undergone a crisis, right? And that program needs to be done in such a way that you walk with the customer until they can run, right? You cannot behave in the manner that business as usual before the crisis, right? So the business as usual can be there for customers who are capable, who are not affected as much by the crisis, but you need to come up with a product and solutions that is purely catering to people who are affected by the crisis. And Islamic Bank may need to go back to the central bank to get some leeway or approval to dispense with certain credit criteria and risk management requirement in order to be able to do that, right? I'm sure the central bank can facilitate by for example, in a generic manner, banks to promote economic activities may want to just reduce interest rate, right? But they may want to allow Islamic banks to even go lower in terms of interest rate for certain customers, right? So that's a different policy action by the central bank to support such initiative by Islamic banks. When you talk about, I mean, people in the bank can be very creative, right? When you give a loan to help people recover from crisis, you can always give, okay, for the first 2 years, you pay a very low interest rate or low rate, and then it step ups later in the third year onwards, right? Or you can give interest free for the first 2 years or first 1 year. So Islamic Bank need to be creative in that manner, right? And with the aim to support customers who are affected by the crisis. The second is businesses, right? So just like the individual, businesses are also affected. Demand literally dropped during the pandemic because there was restriction of movement and there was many things that cannot be done during that period. People literally stopped going to shops. People stopped traveling on transportation. So airline gets into trouble. Cash flow drops. You have bus companies probably closing shop and cannot operate because nobody takes their bus. So most of these businesses needs funding to resume their business or to jumpstart their business, right? Many have also deferred payment to their vendors and require immediate assistance. If they want to restart the business, they have to pay their vendor. If not, they cannot get supplies and whatever, not for them to proceed with the business. So here, in the same way as the consumers, individual, banks needs to come up with programs that are probably never seen before in the ordinary course of business, right? Islamic banks, we have interest-free loans, right? Conventional banks do not have that under their product suite. We can provide interest-free loan to some small, medium enterprises, right? Not all, but some. In the same way as the consumer that I mentioned earlier, you can even have the first year or the first 2 years low rates or zero interest rate, right? Again, this goes back to basic fundamental activity of an Islamic bank, which is to provide financing, right? And financial advisory. So that's typical. The third item, which is seldom seen and seldom or probably never done by many banks anywhere in the world, which is the very basic teaching of Islam, which is when you talk about debt, one, Islam discourages you to take a lot of debt, right? And if you do take debt, you are encouraged to, or it's compulsory for you to pay, because if you don't pay, even in the hereafter, you'll be affected, right? But there is another teaching in regards to debt that many seems to not want to say and promote, right? Which is to forgive debt, right? For those who are unable to pay for reasons beyond their control, right? It's not because they don't want to pay, they just can't pay because they don't have a job, right? Or their business totally collapsed, right? So the question is whether Islamic banks arising from the situation caused by COVID-19 pandemic would actually implement this third teaching in regards to debt, to forgive and to write off debt for some of your customers, right? And this is something that is doable. Of course, shareholders and may scream, "Hey, what happened to my returns?" and things like that. But that can be facilitated by government through, say, tax incentive to the bank itself, right? Because at the end of the day, even if the government reduces the income that they collect from banks, right? Because bank had to write off a lot of debt, and therefore their income, they cannot recognize the income, and therefore they cannot pay tax, right? The economic activities generated by the forgiveness of debt, it will be multifold, right? Businesses will grow, the consumers will spend money, right? All the other businesses will make more income, and they will pay tax, right? So at the end of the day, the government can manage the situation in a manner where, because it is a circle economy, right? Everything goes one round. The forgiveness that is given by banks will act as a multiplier effect to the economy, right? And the government can provide tax incentives to the bank, say 5 years tax deductibility or 2 years tax exemption and things like that, in order to promote the recovery of the economy, right? So this is something that I would encourage Islamic banks to explore, right? Forgive the debt of their customers, so that people can move on without having a handicap right? So those are the three item that an Islamic bank can play in terms of in a very pivotal way to help recover the economy. Right? The halal industry is a subset of the economy, and I think I don't need to specifically comment on that. But the only thing I would say about the halal industry post the pandemic, because the halal industry is based on mainly the food and beverages, people still need to eat even during crisis, right? So most of the halal businesses are still running very strong. Some were affected. I mean, restaurants, small eateries, but the manufacturing part and everything still going strong because people still need to eat, right? But the general treatment is still that I discussed earlier should be equally applicable to the halal industry. I think with that, Ibu Huriah, I stop and pass back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Badlisha. As always, thought-provoking sharing. Thanks, appreciate that. Yes, of course, we notice the loss of jobs, income reduction, no resort to borrow from friends or family. This is happening everywhere in the world. Destitution, we can see it everywhere as well. On your first point, financing to the people in destitute, it is interesting that you propose there should be products and solutions in the sense that maybe the banks should approach the authority to get some leeway or approval to dispense with some credit criteria. And I'm sure your recommendation, there should be some interest-free period is a music to many people. I'm sure many people like to hear that. It will be more interesting to as well hear from you whether or not this has been done in Malaysia, because you also propose for the second point that financing and financial advisory are to be provided to the businesses. And I'm sure the same or similar approach is also need to be done. The banks need to do similar approach as well to get the leeway or approval from the central bank. So do they do this in Malaysia, by the way? In Malaysia?
Not exactly the way that I have described. Some banks are providing financial advisory for people to recover. And that one is easy, right?
Yeah. But when they provide this financial advisory, do they suspend the installment payment, or they still have to do the whatever installment that has been due?
Yeah, I mean, throughout the crisis, we have the banks have given moratorium, both general and targeted, right? And the last,
but not for the people who are already in default, as I understood.
Yeah, not for the people who are already in default.
They're already in trouble, and you're not helping them.
Yeah, and the moratorium is ending by December. So by January, everything goes back. Is an open-ended question, like what happens, right?
Okay.
Because if they do not have money during the crisis, naturally when the crisis supposedly is over or gets better, they still do not have money or enough money to pay the previous amount that was owed to the bank. Right?
Yeah.
So again, I am encouraging the same thing for Malaysian Bank to do here. So hopefully we'll see them doing it.
So basically you are saying the true debt, the extent of the trouble or of the problem in Malaysia, we will only see it in January.
Yeah.
And your third point, this is quite interesting about the write-off, because in Indonesia itself there has been this issue. Some people say that it is not Sharia compliant enough because in kana zu usratin fanaziratun ila maisaro has not been done, has not been implemented by Sharia banks. So yes, we agree there is multiplier effect, and you do that. Basically, we are trying to help economy. It's very, very interesting when you are suggesting, the government could actually offer 5 years tax deductibility or 2 years tax exemption. I hope this is something that is quite thought-provoking for many government, not just the Malaysian government, but also perhaps Indonesia. Perhaps nanti Pak Firman juga will bring up this idea to the central bank. But thank you so much, Dato' Badlisha. Now I'm moving to Pak Firman. Pak Firman, there are several, yes, we noticed that you have the presentation for proper, but meanwhile, we are looking forward and we are very excited to hear about all this new development in Indonesia, BSE, the merger and everything. At the same time, I hope you can also share with us the points that Dato' Badisha shared just now, whether or not BSE, as the largest Sharia bank now in Indonesia, actually looking into this kind of, approach to help people, for the people who are in destitute, for the businesses who are in trouble, but which otherwise they should be okay. But for the pandemic, whether BSE actually thinking of providing, products or solution by seeking leeway or exemption or approval from the central bank, in terms of some credit criteria, in terms of the parameters for the risk when providing financing. So we will highly appreciate if you will also share with us your view or the plan, or in fact, it could be something that is being implemented already in BSE at the moment. So, Pak Firman, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Bu Huriah, Mrs. Dr. Huriah L. Islami, PhD, Executive Board of BPKH, Excellency Ms. Arifa Alavia Allah, representative of Global Bank of the Philippines, and Excellency Mr. Badlisha Abdul Ghani, President of Charter Institute of Islamic Finance Professional. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alhamdulillah wa syukurillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, ni'mal maulana wa ni'man nasyir, wala hawla wala quwata illa billah. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you very much to give opportunity for us representing Bank Syariah Indonesia. Especially I would like to share with you about the performance of Sharia banks in Indonesia. It's also honor for me to deliver about the pivotal of Sharia banking in Indonesia, which I will focus on its transformation in facing the current challenges and opportunities. I would like also to thanks to the non-Asian Universal Conference on Islamic Finance as the host of the event today, and I hope this program will give positive contribution not merely for Islamic finance industry, but also for our beloved nation. To answer Mr. Badrisha's question, we did use the regulatory stimulus COVID-19 pandemic, and Alhamdulillah, our performance has been good with fine asset quality and profitability. Let us see the performance on Indonesia Sharia banking. Well, I would like to start my presentation with Quran. Surah Al-Anbiya 107, wa ma arsalnaka illa rahmatan lil alamin. This is not rahmatan lil Islamin, but rahmatan lil alamin. So, just notice that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala stated that rahmat or blessing that is coming from the teaching of Rasulullah is for the world, the entire universe, not just for Muslim. So, as a Muslim, we need to remind myself that the teaching of Rasulullah are universal and beneficial for all. So next slide, I would like to start my presentation, I think, in the slide, page 6, because I think it is important for us to know about the impact of pandemic COVID, especially to the Sharia banking industry. Actually, I would like to give presentation in 3 chapters. First, I would like to share with you as a banker about the current situation. Current situation will cover about the potential of halal industry. Second, about the potential of population, especially Muslim population in Indonesia. The third is the potential of masjid as the epicenter of Islamic literacy. And then right now is a big trend of hijrah, especially from millennial, to live to be a better person, using the Sharia principle. We call it halal awareness. And fifth, I think this is also our concern about the literation and inclusion index in Indonesia is still low. Literation 6% and inclusion only 11%. If we compare with conventional bank, I think still, below, far below, compared with the conventional banks. I think last but not least about the life-changing after COVID-19. So many changes. We call it, we're going to live with a new normal approach. Well, I think here we can see, from my slide, Alhamdulillah, in the midst of pandemic, Sharia Bank Indonesia still perform positively. Here we can see, from the asset side, financing side, and funding sides. See here, Sharia banking still growth with a 15.29% compared with conventional bank and also from industry, national banking. This is also shown in the financing and funding. Why Sharia is more resilient, facing the pandemic COVID? Because the principle of Sharia. The principle of Sharia, at least we have to avoid five things. We call it maghrib, maishir, goror, haram, riba, and batil. And also the principle of revenue and resharing. I think if we adopt, if we implement this principle, I think we can manage our negative spread, especially related with asset and liability management. Next, I think this is what I mentioned before. This is the potential of halal industry. Here you can see that the potential of Indonesia, not only the population, Muslim population, around 87%, 220 million Muslim population, with the total, what do you call this potential of halal industry, halal food, halal education, halal pharmacy, halal fashion, halal tourism, 4,375 trillion. It's very huge potential basis. But in fact, the market share of Sharia bank is only 6%. It means that we more like consumer rather than the producer, because only 6% yeah, our market share. I think in the future we have to think how to increase the market share of Sharia banks in Indonesia. Yeah? Not only using the organic strategy, but also inorganic strategy. Next, it's about the, what do you say, mosque. We call it masjid. You know? If you are talking about mosque or masjid, this is not only the total of 600,000 masjid in Indonesia, but also the activities within the mosque. So many transactions. We call it social transaction. We call it social activities. Zakat, infak, sedekah, and wakaf. So we can drive, the activities of siswak in the masjid. So that's why our focus in the banks right now, strategy of collaboration with the masjid. So if the total masjid is 600,000, I think we have collaboration with masjid more than 200,000 yeah, collaboration with the mosque. On the economic side, mosque offer unique value proposition with its close relation on social finance, as I mentioned before. Yeah, I think the opportunity of siswak is around 400 trillion, or about 20 billion yearly. Yeah, you can imagine, yeah, how big, yeah, this size, yeah. And the, what do you say, the function of this siswak, I think we can leverage, you know, to many activities, yeah, especially for social, for welfare society, of course, yeah. Next, awareness of halal matters also becoming a public trend. We know that millennials are the one that will shape the economy in the near future. So understanding of their behavior is very important. Reports from ID and research institutes stated that hijrah or changing for better is becoming a trend which affecting their needs, such as making changes in appearance, fashion. We call it halal fashion industry. Following religious content, consuming halal product. I think this will, of course, will increase needs of halal matters, which can drive the halal industry in the future. Next. And this is about the life-changing after COVID-19. We call it 4 mega shift. First, people tend to stay at home. Why? Because we can work. We can work from our home. We use what we call work from home. I think more than 70% until 85%, in the pandemic era. I think last year until this year, yeah, in the midst of this year, we use work from home. Yeah. Second, going back to basic. Yeah. Basic means that we use our primary, basic, yeah, of life. Yeah. And then go virtual. Yeah. Everything can be done by a virtual approach. Yeah. And also, due to this health crisis, people start to realize that life is not about having, but it's about giving, more religious. I think this is in line with the hadith. Yeah? I think Bu Huriyah already know, yeah, well about this hadith. Yeah? Khairunas anfa'um linas. Yeah? The best person is the one is the most beneficial for other people. Yeah? I think COVID gave a lesson for us, yeah, to do more sedekah. Yeah? We call it sedekah, yeah, and be more religious. Yeah? Next, And also Indonesia itself is very internet savvy nation. This is also the impact from the pandemic COVID. Yeah. According to the research, Indonesia spend 5 hours a day for using internet via mobile phones. 1.5 hours more than the world's average. Yes, you can imagine, you know. So I think on the one side, that's a challenge for us because of pandemic COVID. But on another side, I think there is a change of behavior. Before, our customer, they just use the conventional, traditional method, yeah, especially for transferring the money. But I think in the pandemic COVID, they have to know, they have to use mobile banking. I think more than 123%, I think 130% moving from transactional banking using the conventional, traditional, to internet or mobile banking. I think that's positive, I think. So that's why many banks in Indonesia increase their VP's income, you know, from the transactional banking activities. Next. And the response for this phenomenon, I think whether this phenomenon right now is business driven by technology or technology driven by business. And this disruptive era is now. We can see a lot of new platforms emerge in, I think, with high intensity. Service like a payment, peer-to-peer lending, personal financing is being served by technology company, fintech, which maybe only exists 5 to 8 years ago, compared to bank that already established for over than 100 years. So in the future, I think we compete with the fintech here, not only with the banks and financial institutions like insurance and asset management, but also we have to compete with the financial technology, especially Sharia fintech. Yeah. Next, therefore, banks need to have a solid positioning in industry. We call it reposition. I think the new phenomenon right now is digital bank. Yeah, transformation from heavy asset management to light asset management. They mentioned that they use like a digital-based bank activities. Bank needs to transform to serve better and reach more customer, not only thinking about what has been done, but also what is the customer needs. Next. And this digital mindset becomes the pivotal role on transformation. First, bank need to adopt the innovation of technology. I think the challenge in the future is not only collaboration, like a strategic partner, but also need to improve our product and services. By adopting the innovation of technology. Second, being data-driven. Being data-driven in every decision. Third, designing user experience and user interface. And last but not least, moving with the speed, lean, and agile organization. We can make project-based organization structure so everyone can contribute regardless their position. So with that, not only we can be effective in addressing the financial solution, but also we can be efficient in targeting the customer. Next. Sharia banks with its unique value proposition can give one-stop solution for the customer, from financial solution such as business matching, e-commerce transaction, or investment, structured products, social solution like a payment of zakat, infak, and wakaf, or spiritual solutions like a prayer time and qibla. So we serve not only business approach, but also social approach. Not only the transaction, but also spiritual approach. This is the advantages here using the Sharia-based business activities. Next. This is also the combinations, of brick and mortar and digital. Sharia banks can give robust services to the customer. The service, of course, will enhance the customer experience. This is what customer experience. This is about the combining all channel mix. We use here, I think, all banks right now use the same way. Next. Also, Sharia bank concerned with its digital solution. Therefore, we always try to keep better, whether it is like biometric, QRIS payment, gold saving. I think like Bank Syariah Indonesia also we have a product gold saving, tabungan emas. I think this is also how do you say the highest contribution in our revenue. Siswak and other Islamic features. With all the service, we are trying to make the customer satisfied in having the best time and every touch. Next. Sharia banks also try to be the best social and spiritual partner, as I mentioned before. I think this is in line with the surah, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah. So this is also giving service for the benefit in here and hereafter. Next. Therefore, allow me to conclude my presentation with 3 points. First, Sharia is a blessing to the universe. As I mentioned, rahmatan lil alamin. Second, Sharia principle actually give a lot of business and social opportunities. In Indonesia, we call it Halal Industry or Halal Ecosystem Industry. You know, Hajj and Umrah, I think the biggest coming from Indonesia. I think this is the potential business if we handle this business optimally. And last but not least is Sharia banks ready to transform, to be better, financial, social, and spiritual partner, hopefully. I think with that, I end my presentations. Hopefully we can discuss it in more detail after this presentation. Bila taufiq wal hidayah, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih banyak. Thank you very much, Pak Firman. Of course, we are very delighted to hear that BSE has actually optimized the stimulus offered by the government in order to address the adverse effect of the pandemic. And thank you for sharing the data, Bapak, during your presentation. From the data, we could safely conclude that on average, the Sharia banks or Sharia banking industry as a whole in Indonesia is actually doing better during the pandemic compared to its conventional counterpart. And I'm completely with you, Pak. Saya setuju 100, bahkan kalau bisa 1000%, that yes, we need to grow the Indonesian banking assets. We need to actually start to put our mark, Pak, at the global level. That we are there, and the merger of BSE of the first stepping stone to that, and inshallah, Pak, during this week we have already accepted the hibah of the shares in Bank Muamalat. BPKH has actually done that. So inshallah, hopefully, if BPKH will play a more active role in the Islamic banking industry, we are hoping that we can align, we can work together, we can collaborate, Pak, in order to, together with the industry, to grow the Indonesian banking assets. What is very interesting that I observed from your presentation, Pak Firman, you actually brought the different perspectives of the topic, whereby you highlighted the change of the trend, in particular about the halal lifestyle. It's encouraging to hear, and that this is also interesting to hear that the pandemic is actually a blessing in disguise, because as more people resorting to using more of the internet, this is actually giving more access and more business opportunity as well for the Sharia banking industry, which is good. Yes, you have something in common with some other region, including Philippines, that you are moving. It's worthy to note that BSI is actually going one step further, as you did mention that soon you will be competing with fintech. So I support you for that, Bapak. But from all the discussion that we have heard in the past 1 hour and a half, we can actually have we can actually conclude that there is the same message that is sent by all the three speakers, all the panelists that we have here today during this session, that Islamic banks and banks, in part, including even or more so the central bank, has very important role, the pivotal role that it has to play in order to strengthen the economy during this period where we are all having difficult time. We cannot travel. Our lifestyle has to change. It's not necessarily as a matter of option. We have to stay at home for a long time. We cannot travel and all that. It affects the economy, and we don't even know when this is going to end. If it is going to last even during the 2022, we don't know. But Alhamdulillah, it's not all the sad story. It's not all lost. We have heard good news, opportunities, hope that have been said by our speakers. So now, since we still have about 24 minutes left before the end of the session, I would like to invite the audience, be it the audience who are actually physically present in the conference room, or those, we have about 680 people right now in the Zoom, have any question, you can either raise your hand, you can actually write it in the chat or in the Q&A, or you can actually ask the chairperson who are present in the conference room if you have any particular question you would like to address. Feel free to, you can speak either in Indonesian language or in English, is okay. Pak Firman can understand both language, Badlisha can also, Datuk Badlisha also understand Indonesian. He's actually wearing baju batik today. Any question? Maybe while we are waiting, yeah, Pak Firman, Badlisha, while we are waiting for the participant, maybe they're still, you know, most of Indonesian sometimes malu. While we are waiting for them, or maybe it's too much information they are actually gathering from the panelists today. So meanwhile, while we are actually waiting for the question, maybe Pak Firman, dari Datuk Badlisha, do you?
I have a question here in seminar room.
Okay.
Okay, my name is Adip Susilo.
Okay.
My name is Adip Susilo, and I came from Unida Gontor, Ponorogo.
Okay.
I would like to ask some question directly to Mr. Abdullah Firman Wibowo. And I would like to greet you and welcoming you to come again to Gontor for second time. Lastly, we met in Gontor, if I'm not mistaken. And we know our problem in Islamic financial system is the literacy of Islamic financial. In Indonesia, we have a low level of financial literacy indeed, as well as in wakaf literacy. I have conducted a survey in several villages in Ponorogo that they have a low level literacy due to the concept of Islamic banking. Based on my survey, we conclude that the villagers in rural area conclude that Islamic banking is at the same time have a same position with conventional bank. So my question is how to tackle how to deal with this problem. At the same time, this problem will affect to the opposite of strengthening halal industry as well as financial economy in Islamic economy, and also will lower the economy recovery after the pandemic. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Adit Susilo dari Universitas Gontor, Pak Firman. So our audience actually highlighted that it's very low. Because we all know even the literacy level of Indonesia as a whole is rather low compared to our many countries, especially our neighboring countries here in Asia, in Southeast Asia, and especially so with respect to Islamic finance. And this very common misconception that Sharia banking is the same as conventional banks. So he would like you to highlight, Bapak, how to address that issue, especially because such misconception to think that Sharia bank is the same as conventional bank has some adverse effect to the process to strengthen the economy amidst the pandemic. Silakan.
Okay. Thank you, Mas Adit Susilo dari Ponorogo. Saya juga pernah berkunjung, so I already visited Gontor also and gave a public lecture also in Gontor. Yeah. And I think, yes, your question is valid. Our literation index only 6%. Not only that, but also inclusion index only 11%. It means if there are 100%, if we are asking them about not only the knowledge of Sharia, but using the product of Sharia. I think the knowledge of Sharia only 6%, using the product and services Sharia only 11%. Why? If we compare with the conventional bank, of course, we are far below. Why? Because Sharia just only started, I think it was around 20 or 25 years, compared with conventional banking, more than 100 years. First. Second, if we compare between conventional and Sharia, one bank, Sharia, can only serve 10 or 11. Yeah? I mean, 1 million can only serve by 11 branch or unit Sharia, compared with the, with the conventional bank. They have more than 100 unit or cabang or branch serve 1 million customer. So you can imagine. But I think in the future, Bank Syariah Indonesia will have collaboration with masjid to conduct Islamic finance literacy. So the total of masjid right now is 600,000, more than 600,000. And we have what we call it management masjid management program. And we handle right now more than 8,000. So you can imagine, with the standard of good quality of handling, management, managing masjid in, in a good standard of management. And we have now projects that focus on Islamic ecosystem, such as masjid and other halal ecosystem also. We have the resources with over than 1,365 outlets, branch. So we can use here, we can leverage our branch to give literation to the society. And also around 20,000 workforce. 20,000 tenaga kerja. 2,000 workforce to do that. We are very confident to improve this issue in the near future. And I think right now our business strategy is focused on halal ecosystem industry. Not only for the industry, but also literation to our customer. So the total our customer right now is 15 million. 15 million our customer, from asset and liability, from depositors and also from the borrowers. I think this is also our our strategy to literate our customer. And not only that, also we have cooperation with university, with the pesantren, also with the KNE-KS, yeah, Komite Nasional Ekonomi Keuangan Syariah. Yeah, we go together to give alliteration. And also we have some activities to give public lecture, yeah, in many universities in Indonesia. I think this our strategy to increase the literacy in Indonesia. Thank you.
Terima kasih banyak. Thank you very much, Pak Firman. It is very encouraging to hear that BSI has got this plan not only in place but has been implemented to deploy, to make use of the mosques, branches, and workforce. I am in particular interested in hearing that you are using the mosque, Pak. So you are giving back the true value, the true purpose of the mosque, not only as a place to go for prayer, but also to learn, to gain knowledge and all that. So thank you, Pak, on behalf of the Indonesian people, but also, of course, while the news is encouraging because you are also focused to give growth to the halal ecosystem as a whole. But at the same time, of course, we acknowledge the challenge due to the fact that we have over 273 million people here in Indonesia. And of course, the size of the country spread along Katulistiwa from the Sabang to Merauke, and the seas in between being the maritime countries. But inshallah, Pak, together we will actually try to achieve not only the objective but also to bring hasanah, ya Pak, ya, to all. Thank you very much, Pak Firman. Is there any further question? Now that it's already 9:46, we may be able to take one or two more questions, either from the audience or from those participants in the Zoom. Silahkan.
Tes. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
My name is Satria Utama from Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta.
Yeah.
My question especially for Mr. Firman. In the beginning of BSI merger, I think we know that there is a statement that BSI is not in the position that pro to small medium enterprises. But I think as academician, I actually disagree with this statement. But maybe actually I need the proof, I need the statement directly from the leaders of BSI that BSI has in the position that support and also strengthen the small medium enterprises, especially in this pandemic era. Thank you.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Satria Utama dari Universitas Muhammadiyah Jogja. Mungkin Pak Firman, before that, because we have only like about 13 minutes left, and there is another question. I noticed in the chat from Lukman Hamdani how different halal industries from Indonesia and Malaysia. So Pak Firman, maybe if you would take 5 minutes to address the two questions, and maybe thereafter 3 minutes for Datuk Badlisha to also address this question on how different halal industries from Indonesia and Malaysia. Mungkin silakan Pak Firman dulu. Ya, pertanyaan pertama mengenai moto di merger, Pak. Apakah betul open to UMKM?
Well, I think merger actually is the implementations of an organic strategy to make it, faster in terms of market share, in terms of industry growth, Sharia industry growth. Before we just only in the rank 20, 21, 27. Right now, after merger, we are on the 7th rank, in the total, of national bank in Indonesia. So you can imagine right now we are on the 7th rank with the total asset 260 billion. So you can imagine. And I think we have 3 main segments. First is corporate, in terms of size of asset. Second, retail and small and medium enterprise. Third, is consumer, and include like a microfinancing. So we always try to make it balance in our portfolio, in productive or in consumptive segments. In small and medium enterprise, we have three focus. First, micro or micro banking. Second, linkage and non-linkage, such as project financing. So I think that's all our focus here. Not only this is in line with our authority policy rules, at least 30%, 20 to 30% from the total our portion. Not only this, but we want to leverage, to escalate, not only from micro, from SME, but also to be more corporate, high-end customer. So that's why if we support the SME to be high-end or corporate, they are more competitive with other customers. I think that's our focus also. Second, I think the question is related with the COVID-19 affecting customers' performance. Especially SMEs, we need to adjust our risk appetite. This is about risk appetite actually. But I think from time to time, if we can educate, we can increase their capability, I think in the future, SME can compete with another segment. I think that's my answer. Still optimistic about the SME, because SME right now is more than 80 until 90% in terms of a customer. In terms of size, it's just only I think less than 10%. But I think as a Sharia principle, I think we can serve not only corporate but also SME, retail, and consumer. Okay.
Mengenai itu Pak, difference between halal industry in Indonesia and Malaysia, Bapak?
Yeah, Indonesia, actually we have more than 220 million Muslim population. And I think the potential of halal industry is very big compared with the Malaysia. But why in Malaysia, the contribution market share is more than Indonesia? Because the total of conventional bank in Indonesia is too huge, too big, 8,000, I think 8,000, 8,000 trillion, 8,000 trillion compared with the Sharia, only 650. If they just grew 10%, they increase more than 800 trillion. But if Sharia bank increased even 100%, they just only increase 600. So it is not comparable, it is not apple to apple. Of course, in the future, we have to use an organic strategy. And it was done by Bank Syariah Indonesia. We merged. This is like a strategy. We call it an organic strategy. And second, right now is the trend to, convert, like a hijrah, from conventional bank pembangunan daerah, regional bank, to be Syariah bank, like a BPD, NTB, BPD Aceh, and Nagari, I think, in the future also. This is also, strategy of inorganic, conversion from conventional to regional. So that's why this will impact also to the halal ecosystem, like halal industry, halal fashion, halal education. It's quite different, from the Malaysia. We have more than like a pesantren. We have so many pesantren in Indonesia. We have also like like Islamic society, like organization, like Muhammadiyah, Nahdlatul Ulama also. This is also support, in the future. I think that's that it depends on how we make like a collaboration with them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very interesting, Pak Firman. Dato Badlisha, do you agree with that or disagree, or perhaps you have different angles to it?
Well, I don't disagree, but what I can say, there's no other than the size of the market under each country. The industry in itself is not much difference between the two, right? Basically, there's consumption and there is the production, right, of halal goods. So at the end of the day, it's just about activities. We just need to do more and more of halal activities, and for the Islamic banks to support all halal activities. But before I hand over back to you, Ibu Huria, let me just contribute to the question in regards to awareness in the market for Islamic finance. Just to share the experience in Malaysia, when the industry first started, the same thing, right? People do not know about Islamic finance. They accuse Islamic finance to be the same as conventional. They accuse Islamic finance to be worse than conventional and things like that. So I mean, similar reaction in any market for something new, right? So what was done in Malaysia is that it takes too much resources and effort to educate the whole country to be done by one bank, right? So what we did was, together with the regulator, the Association of Islamic Banks come together and combine our resources and our fund. We jointly contribute to the awareness program on an equal or proportionate basis to the size of the bank, and go on a roadshow on a monthly or quarterly basis for several years running, non-stop, to just educate the market on Islamic finance. Once the level is comfortable or acceptable and things like that, then we reduce those awareness program, but it still continued on a joint basis until today, notwithstanding.
Wow, that's massive effort, and yes, it's a great idea. Maybe something to think about, something for Indonesia to also consider that we may want to do that, especially considering the size of the country. Thank you very much, Dato. Thank you very much, Pak Firman. MashaAllah, in less than 2 hours, we have gathered so much information, so much knowledge, so much wisdom, so much thought-provoking viewpoint, which not only intriguing, they're also interesting, and I hope they will be very beneficial and useful to all that attend here. We have about 3 minutes left, so in order to make the best use of our 3 minutes left, I would like to give each of the panelists 1 minute opportunity to make their closing remark. Maybe this time I start with Dato Badlisha. Your 1 minute starts now.
Thank you. I think at the end of the day, this topic that we have in terms of the role of Islamic Bank to support economic recovery after COVID-19 is pretty straightforward, right? It deals with what do Islamic Bank need to do, right? And I have outlined 3 things earlier, and the third item is something a little bit interesting and exciting to my mind, if it is done where banks forgive debt of those who really just can't do anything about it, all right? And that would naturally change the way the market sees Islamic Bank, and change, in fact, if you want to talk about getting awareness, that is one best way to really get everyone to notice Islamic banks in Indonesia, and the talk about Islamic banks for giving debt of certain selected or qualified customers is going to be beneficial to the growth of the industry in Indonesia for years to come, right? And I would seriously recommend for Islamic banks to consider how to go about doing that in one form or another, right?
Yes.
They can work with zakat bodies, for example, where you can use zakat to pay off the debt of the customer. So instead of forgiving, it can be paid for by zakat, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many ways to go about it, and I would hope to see it happen.
Yeah, so that's a win-win approach, ya, Datuk, ya. Very interesting, Pak Fan. 1 minute last closing remark, please. Silakan, Pak Firman, closing remarknya.
Thank you. I think we still believe that the total potential of halal ecosystem in Indonesia is still big and not optimally utilized. The key of success of Sharia industry and also for other business is adaptation and adoption. Adaptation with the new changes, digitalization, and adoption with the new value of globalization. I think this is in line with the ayat Inna Allaha la yuhorima biqaumin hatta yuhorima bi anfusihim. I think this is also the key if you want to be successful is adaptation and adoption. I think we are optimistic to face the challenge as I mentioned in our presentation. Thank you very much.
Masya Allah, very insightful indeed. And a very brief, Datuk Badlisha said both, but Datuk Badlisha and Pak Firman says we have to be both Sharia. Badlisha basically saying now this is the time that we should adopt wa in kana zu usratin fanaziratun ila maisara. If they cannot actually fulfill their obligation, give them some time, give them the leeway, do win-win approach. Zakat whatsoever, there are so many resources actually offered by Sharia. Pak Firman juga kalau dulu champion Hasanah, sekarang adopt, Masya Allah. Ya, karena because in the Quran we already been told, I mean like you cannot actually cry, fall, you cannot say it is you being else's mistake, no. Because Quran already say, if you don't change, if the call to adapt and adopt, ya Pak ya. So, Masya Allah, a great closing remark for everyone. We thank you so much on behalf of the organizing committee, on behalf of BPKH as well. Pak Firman, Datuk Badlisha, it's been a great session. I hope everyone has found this session to be not only interesting and interactive, but also useful and beneficial. Jazakumullah khair. And with this, I would like to close the session with alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And back to you, di MC.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Bu Arya.
Terima kasih Pak Firman, terima kasih Datuk Badlisha. Terima kasih banyak. Assalamualaikum. Jazakallah khair.
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much to our speakers and also our moderator. Thank you very much, Ibu. We hope that what has been delivered here today by our speakers have been enlightening in some way. We thank all of you for listening in.
شكرا لجميع المحاضرين وكذلك شكرا للمنظمة في هذه المحاضرة الرابعة.
But before we end the session, let us take a photo together. Ibu, is that okay to you to take a photo together?
Silakan.
All right.
Mungkin kita minta Pak Firman muncul kembali, Pak, supaya bisa difoto.
Bapak Firman, can you
Ya,
turn
Pak
on
Firman.
your camera so that we can...
Difoto dulu, Pak. Datuk Badlisha, is he still here? Oh, Badlisha has left. It's okay. Just go ahead. Pak Firman still with us. Thank you, Pak, for staying this.
Okay. I will count to 3. Count from 3. 3, 2, 1. Cheese. All right. One more ya, Ibu ya?
Silakan.
Okay. One more. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you
Terima
very
kasih.
much.
Terima kasih Pak Firman. Terima kasih MC. Saya izin leave.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our prestigious guests, allow us to end this 4th plenary session. After this, we will have a 15 minutes break until 10:15. After that, we hope all of the audience. No break. Okay, I'm sorry. There are no breaks. And we hope all of the audience can gather here to be ready to our 5th plenary session. Thank you for your attention.
أيها السادة الكرام، الحمد لله سنختتم هذه المحاضرة الرابعة، فمباشرة سنستمر إلى المحاضرة التالية، ونرجو منكم العفو. شكرا على حسن اهتمامكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalatu